It's pretty simple. There's a couple things we need to do first. Really, there's not a lot of rules when it comes to salads. But with this one, I wanted to definitely incorporate some asparagus. So here I have a bunch of asparagus. So what I wanted to do was to get a little bit of this cooked off. That way it has a chance to cool on the plate before I put the salad down. So it's a little more interesting because I'm on a mobile burner here. But just like at home, it would look like this. I already have this hot, so I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil. And we're going to get this kind of up the temp. One thing about the asparagus, so it's interesting. A lot of people have like ends, and some of these ends are like really, really tough. You'll probably be able to tell if you just kind of like bite it a little when it's raw, but sometimes they're really tender, and you'll end up with a lot more usable product than you would think. You could either just use that as whole stems, or remember my Italian grandfather really liked. My grandmother almost took those scraps chopped up and threw them in a really hot pan and sauteed them up almost so they were almost like burnt. And then she would scramble eggs into them, and it's good. It's like this really, really unique flavor, but you have to get the color on it to really kind of get what I'm talking about.
So would those be thin slices then? So she kind of like julienne or...
Yeah,
that sounds delicious. I'm literally writing that down.
It was good. So you just throw it in a really hot pan, and they were pieces. It's like one of his favorite things. So they were pieces like
okay.
that. So yeah, just sauteed them up. You could throw some garlic at the end, whatnot. Usually when I'm like sauteing, I wait till I see just like a little bit of smoke coming up. You don't want a lot because there is like breaking points on oil where basically you're going to burn the oil. I think we talked about this before, where peanut oil has the highest like breaking point. So that's why they use it in wok cooking quite a bit. The avocado oil is okay. Grapeseed oil is really good. And then it starts to tack down like extra virgin. Yeah, you guys probably can't see it, but I'm getting a little. So I'm going to pay attention to that, because if I were to let it go, you could hit like a flash point on it and you'll go in the flames. And then you got a problem too where you're going to have to smother that with something, because you don't want to mix the water and oil. So it's a little bit of really making sure you're safe. I'll go a little bit more into this in a bit. I'm going to salt and pepper it. I never really pre-salt things. They tend to kind of start eating away at the product, even when I'm doing weddings or events. I don't really like to just go and put salt on raw fish and leave it, or it's going to start like drawing out water. But with that, you'll see when I start talking about the sauerkraut in the sandwich, that's actually something that you do want. You do want it full in water. So it's weird. Sometimes it's harmful and sometimes it's helpful. So you just have to know kind of when you want to go about doing that. So the asparagus doesn't take much. You can see because the oil was really hot, it hit it real fast, so that they're going to keep their green is what I'm looking at. If your oil's like low and not that great, then you're going to lose that color. And ultimately, I'm trying to cook the asparagus like I would pasta, where it's a little bit al dente, only for the fact that it will soften up a little bit when it's on the plate. You just always have that carryover cooking that you want to pay attention to and try not to overdo it. So I kind of had in mind a look at the salad, like what I was gonna do. So I did the asparagus first. That way this has time to cool because I don't want to put the greens on it while it's hot and then you're kind of wilting your salad. So I kind of did like a back and forth like that. I'm going to put my salad greens right here with the beets, and then we're going to do some beets around the outside. So to do dressings, there will be recipes posted, but I always go by a general rule. This one's unfortunately going to be a little bit different, but the way to think about it is you need 1 part acid to 2 parts oil. Okay, if you always follow that rule, you'll be okay. So I have a 1/4 cup here. So this one actually has 2 acids in it. It has the apple cider vinegar. So I'm going to go with 1/8 cup. And then the orange juice, I'm going to go with 1/8 cup. So that is 1/4 cup. So that means I'm going to need 2 of these in oil to really probably get the right consistency. Another rule to follow, now you can emulsify oil straight into this as is, but it will separate. So I always add a little bit of Dijon to my salad dressings. You can think of it, it looks like paste, it's going to hold it together like paste. It adds a little bit of flavor. I'll do a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. Now that's going to be, this one's not too bad because of the orange juice has a little bit of sugar content. But if you're using straight vinegars, sometimes I'll hit it with like a little bit of sugar, right? Just to kind of counteract how tart it is. We use a lot of agave in our dressings. That way it's still vegan, because supposedly sugar is not, if you get really, really technical. So that's kind of the start on the vinaigrette. Now what I'm going to do here, I have a little water over here. One good trick, 2 good tricks, I always put my knife kind of under the cutting board so I can never run into the cutting edge. That's something I'm pretty strict about. So you're going to take a damp towel and you're just going to spin it up. And then you're going to use it to make a well. So you're kind of making this kind of round circle here. That way I can put the bowl in there. And now my bowl, like I literally could stir away and I don't have to hold the bowl. That's like something that definitely, it's going to save you a lot of time. So when you're emulsifying, you typically will start out with like a little bit of oil. You're whisking in. I mean, to be that honest, usually I do this in a blender. I just didn't want to turn the blender on in front of you and say, here, hold on, while this excruciating noise goes about. And hey, look, it's magic, it's done. So we're going to do it the old fashioned way. So I'll start dumping a little bit of oil in. Now that ratio on the oil, to me, that's what would probably get a pretty good thickness. It's not, that's the thing about culinary versus baking. You have some room here. You know, you can definitely mess around a little more versus like baking. You can't do that. So we're going, we're almost there. I use the mustard pretty much all the time. There's really rarely that I want the vinaigrette broken, and if I did, it would be like on an entree where I'm kind of doing a fish and laying in it. I want that to see the oil kind of separate. If especially if I've used like a bright green extra virgin olive oil in the dressing, that will separate from say raspberry juice, and then you'll have a green and a red, and then having it separate like that is kind of where I would play around with it more. So let me get this done for you. Anybody have any questions so far?
None so far, but would you say that Dijon is the mustard you go to the most for kind of that emulsifying of salad dressings? Or if somebody doesn't have that, would other mustards work as well?
Typically, if I'm not using Dijon, I'll use grain mustard because I like those little bee like
The
seeds.
texture.
So you could see it's holding together. It's let me get a spoon here. And you can also do this test where see how it's kind of
Oh, lovely.
it's holding. Now you can get it thicker like that, especially when I do more entrees. Like I've got them really thick in the blender where it almost looks like an aioli. And just depending on how much I need it to hold up and whatnot for that. So now that we have our vinaigrette made, our asparagus is cool. We're gonna move into the salad. So for question on the beets, I didn't want to do it here because we'd be here forever. There's two ways of cooking the beets. One is you want a really, really light simmer on them, and it's usually gonna take 45 minutes. I just check them with a toothpick, and it shouldn't be mush. The toothpick's going to go in. If it goes in, that's a good sign. But you do want it a little bit firm because you're going to have that carryover for cooking, as I explained. So typically, you don't want a high boil. That's where everybody makes their mistake because what that's going to do, I bring it up to a boil and then I lower it way down. If you keep it at a high boil, it's going to cook the outside of the beet really fast and the inside's still going to be raw. And then you're waiting on the middle to catch up. And then you end up with this really uneven cooked beet where it's like mushy and then it's hard and it's just weird and it's not the right way to do it. So the other way we do, and I'm cooking for hundreds or thousands, we take stainless steel pans. They're called hotel pans here. Usually there's one laying around. They're like the inserts in a chafer, but they come in different like inches. We put the beets in there. We fill it so the water covers the beets. We put foil over the top, and then we put those pans in about a 400-degree oven. It takes a little longer, but you don't have to worry about the water reducing down and I got to add more water because now the beets aren't covered. And especially you're talking sometimes 100 pounds of beets. It's just not feasible to have all these pots going. So we put them in the pans. We cover them with water, cover them with foil, and we bake that until they're tender. You can open up the foil and test them, and then we take them out. The other thing with the beets, I saved a couple here. So this is the cooked one. Okay, it looks cooked, right? So I just took these out of the water and I left them overnight unwrapped in the refrigerator. So they look like a little bit ugly. But typically, if you've cooked your beets right, you can just run your thumb along and you could see how it's not drying it out, it's pulling water out. And it's just going to end up eating up your produce. So we're just going to give this a little toss. Other options you could do is if you have your beets cooked, you could saute them up in the pan, almost like I did with the asparagus. Kind of do that after. It'll save a little bit of the red bleeding. It tends to kind of seal the beet in, and you won't get some of, like you'll see, it's kind of bleeding into the cheese a little bit. It tends to kind of help that. I'm definitely kind of like conscious of that whenever I'm dealing with beets, like how I'm going to use them, because I don't want this like red mess. So then I'll switch over to the yellow beets if need be.
So would pan frying the red beets be essentially searing them so that beet juice doesn't move as easily out?
Yeah, it's almost like a steak. It's going to seal the outside. It's also going to caramelize them because beets are so high in sugar that you almost get like a candied technically it's almost like candying them from their own natural sugars, and you're gonna add like a whole nother like phase on top of that. So that's definitely something you could do. But you'll have to cool them before you add them to the salad, so keep that in mind. They don't have to be stone cold, but at least just not, you're not dumping like hot oil beets into the salad. Like, wow, I didn't end up with much. Ultimately, the plate looks like that.
Beautiful.
So, the biggest thing I can stress here is people get really bunched up when it comes to like cooking, and part of the experience is we would have never got anywhere as chefs if we didn't make mistakes or like experiment a little with like different flavors and whatnot. And it's not like baking. Like baking, you have to stay in those walls, or something's probably going to go wrong where the culinary side's really different, because I have like hereditary cholesterol, so beets are going to reduce your cholesterol. They're good in many ways, but mostly because of what I'm trying to watch that I eat. Like I always have raw beets at home, so I'll take like half of a raw beet. We have a blend tech. I'll throw that raw beet in the blend tech. I'll throw 2 stalks of celery in there, 2 carrots, some lime juice and water, and spinach. And I just blend that up into almost like a smoothie, and then I drink that. And that, to me, it tastes pretty good actually. And then I'm getting like juice with like all those vitamins
And all the fiber and all that good stuff
yeah,
still
don't strain it out, because then you're just taking away your fiber and whatnot. So sauerkraut, we're gonna do the sauerkraut and the smoked beets real fast, because this is something you would have to do a day ahead. So I'm gonna take a little bit of this green cabbage here. I cut a slice. Now I have my flat surface. When you're doing this cabbage, you want to try to slice it as thin as you can. It's just going to help when you go to make the sandwich later. And it's just going to work better to hold everything together. So I'm going to put this shredded cabbage in one container. We're going to be pouring over almost like a pickling liquid, so it has to be a container that's going to be able to withstand that. And then second, we're going to take our bigger beet, and I'm going to remove just a little bit of the bottom where the root would be. And then I'm just going to cut, I'll show you the size. I'm going to cut rings. You have to be careful though on this, because this is exactly where I was warning before. You're kind of creating an avenue for that beet to kind of roll out from under you. And that's exactly when I learned my lesson. So we're going to put the beets in there. So I will tell you, we're pickling both. Now, as far as sauerkraut, the way you make sauerkraut usually is you take your raw cabbage and you toss it with a decent amount of salt. And then over time, like I was trying to explain to you, that salt's gonna start pulling out all the water from the cabbage, okay? And then what that's doing, it's creating a brine, so a salty liquid. And then the cabbage eventually is gonna start like a fermentation process. So you can tell when you have really, really good sauerkraut, because you'll almost pick up on almost like a bubbly flavor to it. And that's some of the fermentation that's still going on. And what it is there's bacteria on every produce. And it's usually the type of bacteria that is used like with yogurt. So it's not like this extremely harmful bacteria, but the bacteria starts reacting with the sugars, and then it starts forming lactic acid. And then all of this comes together in like a fermentation that's usually mixed with like spices in there. And that's how you make real sauerkraut, and it takes a while. So the quick way to do it is to kind of create a pickling liquid. So what I have here, let's see what I'm doing. So once again, I got apple cider vinegar. So we're going 50-50. So apple cider vinegar. And then we're gonna do, sorry, I went offline there. We're gonna do, oops, let me grab. And then we're gonna do 50% water. So it's 50% acid, 50% water. And then what we wanna do, you can buy this in the store. It's like a pickling spice.
Okay.
Has everything from allspice in it, bay leaves, coriander seed, cloves are in here, a little bit of pepper flake. It's just easier to buy it. You can modify it if you want. So I'm gonna dump a little bit of that in the liquid. And then ultimately, so you're kind of looking like that. You have your liquid. If you want it like a little sweeter, you could add like a little bit of sugar, but ultimately I think it's fine like this. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna bring that up to a boil. I have one going right here, and you can see the difference. So over time, those pickling spices are gonna let out a lot of juice. See how it's almost like tea now?
Yeah.
And like where I'm at, you can smell that. It's like, it just smells like almost like Christmas and ham and whatnot. So what I like to do, I don't like to boil the ingredients in the pickling liquid. I rather add, I have a strainer because you don't want all that pickling stuff going in there. I'm just gonna pour the boiling water over the cabbage. And I'll explain why in a second. So to kill two birds with one stone, now I'm gonna add this pickling liquid over the beets. Okay. So we just added that to both. Now the reason I pour it over raw cabbage is I still want it to have like a little bit of a crunch. It will settle in because you need to let this sit overnight, okay, to really like do its magic. But you'll notice it'll be soft, but it won't be like mush like braised cabbage. You'll still have that crunch that you want that you get from sauerkraut. So ultimately, this sauerkraut you would put in the fridge, and then when you come the next day, strain it off, you're gonna end up with sauerkraut. You can see that this is still a little firm, but it's soft and it's worked in. Now for the smoked, you're probably saying, well, I thought he said smoked beets. So the easiest way to do this, but you have to be careful when you do this. So they actually sell a product called liquid smoke, and we usually would never, we don't use this a lot, but I have found like in this recipe, it works really well. You just have to be really careful with how much you use. So I'm gonna add a little bit of the liquid smoke there. I think I added literally a quarter of a teaspoon, and then
I was gonna say I usually deal with it in drops. So I'm like, how many drops do you think you're using?
Because what you want to do is then go back and taste that pickling liquid and go, oh, okay, I can taste the smoke now, and it's not like horrendous.
If
like
somebody goes too smoky, which is very easily to do with liquid smoke, what do you recommend?
So I think I would dump that off because the pickling liquid's not that expensive, and I would start over. To be dead honest, that's why I would really err on caution. Like,
no, a little bit goes a long way.
Yeah, that's why we don't use it a lot. Now, like in our kitchens, we have a full smoker. We can put it in there, or we can cold smoke it, whatever temp we want. But for the average home user, that's what I would do. And you're going to leave these overnight. Now, what it's going to do, it's going to pickle the beet, and it's going to add that smoke flavor. So you're going to have a pickled smoked flavor, which is almost what corned beef is like, essentially. And that's why I did it like this. I think we actually did smoke them in the beginning, and it's like, you know what, it's just as good with the liquid smoke as long as you don't overdo it.
And a much easier shortcut.
Yeah, so I'm gonna pour this off. We'll say this, sat overnight. It's fine. So let me just dump this back in the pot.
That would be a fun liquid to save also and pickle some smoked beety juice into cabbage or carrots or some other vegetable.
Well, that's the thing. We'll use it for a couple cycles. Like it's definitely something that could take like another round. Uh, Maybe like one or two more times is what I'd advise, and then I would probably lose it. Now, to do the sandwich, here comes the fun part, right? So we have to make one more thing. We need to make the Russian mayonnaise. So we could either do Thousand Island or we could do Russian. So Russian is mayonnaise and a little bit of ketchup. I'll show you the color after so you know what you're looking for. So mayonnaise, ketchup, you're looking for horseradish in there. Now a Russian mayonnaise or dressing has a little bit of chili paste in it. So for this one, I'm just gonna add a little bit of sriracha. And then we're just gonna stir that together and then I'll show you really, really easy. I'll show you the color you're trying to accomplish. I think everybody kind of knows what Thousand Island looks like. So you're kind of going for this almost like salmon color.
Yep.
Okay. Now, so that's Russian dressing. So let's just say we took the sriracha out, or I don't know, maybe you want a hybrid Russian Thousand Island. The only difference between that and the Thousand Island is Thousand Island has relish in it, which we have here. So if you like more like pickle or whatnot, throw a little bit of relish in there, stir that up. And then you'll be able to see now, this probably looks more characteristic of your Thousand Island dressing with the chunks in it.
Definitely.
And it's still thick. You want that thick. If you want the sandwich to be vegan, then just get a vegan mayonnaise. I've actually used it before, and it works. Put it that way. It's not like horrendous, and it tends to be thicker, which is interesting, which I like because I don't want my sandwiches really just getting too far out of control. So what we're gonna do here, that's interesting. Sorry, we'll put this one on. These induction burners only work on some.
So temperamental with their cookware, they'll
Look
accept.
at these lovely nonstick pans that aren't gonna work. Okay, so one big thing in catering, and it's gonna play into this too, is you wanna shield your sandwiches because nobody likes a soggy sandwich. So, and let's face it, if you're gonna have a Reuben, it might as well be a pretty good one. So what I'm gonna do is the top bread, I'm gonna put 2 pieces of cheese. I'm basically just trying to cover the bread. That way, everything else I put on it is gonna be protected by that cheese layer. Like you're thinking of your bread here. So we got top and bottom there. Then I'm gonna go in with my nice, I mean, I could already smell it, the smoked beets. So this is why I cut them in circles and not little tiny pieces, because you just want it easy. You don't want to add the more things that could just fall out on you. You can just rely on biting through it. So I will add those. And I'll give you a little show here.
Beautiful.
So
and you're really starting to kind of mimic some of that meat texture of something big and chewy to bite into instead of kind of keeping all of the shredded vegetables on.
Yeah, I'm also paying attention to how it's going on because you don't want the burger crisis scenario where you cook the burger and it's big in the middle and the outsides aren't, and you're like, I don't even know how to eat this because it's like a big mound. I'm trying to keep things flat, not like I couldn't care if it's tall. I just want it even. That way you just kind of have you're thinking of a foundation. You want it really stable. So I went ahead and put our sauerkraut on. Okay, so we're like that now. Yep, that's hot. Now I'm gonna add the hybrid Russian Thousand Island. I tend to put a decent amount on this because I really like the Reubens just to kind of be intense. And so we got our dressing on there. Let me move some of this stuff. Can you actually see the cutting board?
We can see it. It looks delicious.
I'm really like anal about stuff being clean. Okay, so then I'm gonna put the top on. And let's face it, this cheese is gonna kind of sizzle down into the pan, but that's always a good thing unless it just gets really scorched. So I'll do a little white up here. Now, the best grilled cheese, it kind of goes back and forth. Like mayonnaise works really, really good for grilled cheese, and a lot of people don't realize that.
I'm a convert over butter. It's always mayonnaise. Just crisps so much nicer.
I agree, but the only thing you lose is the butter tends to get brown, and you lose that like real nutty. So it's interesting, but I agree. If I was having you could hear that noise. So now basically you're making a grilled cheese. Okay, so I'm gonna put the mayonnaise on the top. And you're not talking a huge amount of mayonnaise, almost like you're just lightly buttering bread. You definitely don't want a ton. I will say the one thing about the mayonnaise is it does brown fast. So you have to find that magic kind of temperature where you're just not like browned out like instantly. If that
Do you
makes
like
sense.
kind of a medium high then versus a full on high so you're not getting too hot?
If it was me, I would just do medium and just let it sit there. Well, okay, so you're trying to melt that cheese down, and that can be difficult, especially with like the coleslaw, or sauerkraut. But I will tell you that if you really want to up the sandwich, then on the sides saute your sauerkraut and add some color to that, and like salt and pepper it. And that just puts it like on a whole new level. That's really about that kind of like, oh man, how can I make this better?
Yeah.
And if it isn't, well, then okay, well, it wasn't. I mean, the Reuben, it was an interesting history when I looked it up. So it originated in Omaha, Nebraska. Kind of like
Really?
sell all those steaks, so if you don't want your steak, I guess you get your Reuben. It was started by a Jewish Lithuanian grocer that was bringing them to his poker games that he would have back in the 1920s. And that's how the sandwich came about. So
awesome.
Like I tell everybody, get really good at your cooking techniques, like sauteing and grilling. Just get like those moves down of like what it takes to really do them properly, and you'll see like a huge improvement in your food if you're truly knowing like how to sear something properly, or like bake something properly, or whatnot. Usually when people are baking, they're usually not baking because they have too much like water content like in the oven going on. Like roasting is like a really dry method. And usually it's just that the home equipment can't really handle that type of scenario. So it's not always the fault of whoever's doing it, but it's just the way it goes. And I don't attempt to do wok cookery at home because you'll just never hit the real way. So I just
exactly. Oh, lovely. Did you put the toothpicks in to help you transfer it out of the pan, or just kind of for show?
I just put them in to try to hold it together, and then they can get rid of it. But you can see, I mean, nobody's here, so I can't touch it. It's nice and like
melty,
juicy, and the flavor on it's amazing. And like I said, you can go vegan with that. You just switch over the mayonnaise. Like we've done it. We've done it without the cheese. You just have to, pump it up a little bit, but that's how it's done ultimately.